Hello everybody. Today we're going to continue to look at fractions, and today we're going to focus on how we can decompose or break apart fractions as a sum of unit fractions. So we're going to be thinking about how we can take a visual of some fractions and think of it as an addition sentence. So there's a couple of terms here that you guys need to really be familiar with. The first is a unit fraction. And just a reminder, a unit fraction is what your whole is broken up into. So what unit are we talking about? So if we take a look at our first example here, what unit are we talking about? What is our whole broken into? It's broken into thirds. So our unit fraction is going to be thirds. If we look at our second rectangle down here, we have it broken into 6 equal parts. So our unit fraction is going to be sixths. So that's going to be really key today because some of our examples, we're going to be seeing more than a whole on a fraction strip or on our tape diagram. And so we'll need to think about what is our unit fraction we're working with before we start to figure out what fraction is shown and then how to break it down into sums. The second term you need to remember is sum, which is the answer to an addition problem. So if I do 1 plus 1 plus 1 equals 3, the sum is 3. So we're thinking about making sure we have different fractional parts being added together to equal the sum of the fraction that we're talking about. Okay, so let's take a look at our first example. We have a rectangle. It's been broken into thirds, and I can label each part as 1/3 if I'd like. 1/3, 1/3, 1/3. And if I want to show this as a number bond, I can say that I have one whole, and it's broken into 1, 2, and 3/3, right? 1/3, 1/3, 1/3. And I can write this as an addition problem. 1 is equal to 1/3 plus 1/3 plus 1/3, because I'm adding all of these thirds together. So I can even label my tape diagram as there's my whole, right? And I'm saying that I've got 1/3 plus 1/3 plus 1/3 to equal the whole thing, or one whole. If I saw some different colors on here, let's say I labeled this slightly differently. Let's say this is still a whole, but I say I've got this portion and this portion, right? So if I put some colors on here, let's say this is one section, the red, and then one section of yellow. I can still write that as an addition sentence or as a number bond. I still have one whole, right? But what's represented by the red this time is now 2/3, and what's represented by the yellow is 1/3. So I could write it as one whole is equal to 2/3 plus 1/3, right? So I can break it up into different ways, and I can still get my sum of my one whole of a number, right? Now, let's take a look at down here. We have a second example. Let's figure out our unit fraction first. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 parts. So our unit fraction is going to be sixths in this case. So once again, I'm just going to move this down a little bit. I'm going to label this. This is my one whole, right? I'm saying this is a whole. That's how I know it's sixths. Now let's say I have this portion yellow and this portion red. So what we're talking about is we're only going to talk about adding the yellow and the red portion, the shaded portions. So we're going to kind of ignore the other portions right now. So I can label each of my colored portions, right? I know that each one of these pieces is going to be 1/6 because we've already identified that as our unit fraction. But now I can break it down a little bit more. I have my yellows, and I know those are 2/6, and I've got my reds, which are 3/6. Everybody agree? How many sixths are highlighted? Because we're talking about how much is highlighted or colored. Well, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 sixths highlighted. Does everybody see? I have 5/6 of my fraction strip or my tape diagram colored. And I can break it down and show that I have 2/6 yellow and 3/6 red. So I can write this as an addition problem. 2/6 plus 3/6 is equal to my 5/6. Notice that the denominator, my bottom number in both of these examples, hasn't changed, right? We're talking about thirds or we're talking about sixths. This is why it's called a unit fraction. It's just a unit. It's like saying 2 dogs plus 3 dogs is 5 dogs. The dogs part doesn't change. It's how many of them we're talking about. That's the numerator portion. Okay, the numerator is what's actually getting added, that 2 plus 1 to make 3, or that 1 plus 1 to make 3. Or in this case, 2 plus 3 to make the 5. So the numerator is what's being added because those are the items that we're actually adding. Our denominator is just our unit. Okay? Now let's take a look at my next example. I have 2 different rectangles shown, and I'm going to break them up into thirds. And we know our unit fraction is thirds because I have 2 separate pictures, right? So we know our unit fraction is 1/3. But what happens if I do this? I'm just going to stick them together like this. If I show you that this is 1 whole, you're not going to say this is a fraction strip of sixths. If I said that this whole thing was 1 whole, then we'd be working with the fractions, the unit fraction of sixths, right? But in this case, I've said that this part right here is 1 whole. So we see how many parts it's broken into. It's thirds. So our unit fraction in this case is going to be thirds. What if I colored this much yellow and then this much red? Let's see what we would come up with as our addition sentence. So once again, let's look at our first little part that's yellow. How many parts are colored? That's our numerator, 2. And what's our unit fraction? Remember, the whole is right here. And there's only 3 parts in the whole, so we're talking about 2/3 is right there. How much is this? Well, 3 are colored. That's our numerator. And remember, our unit fraction hasn't changed, so it's 3/3. So if I look at a number bond, what do I have? How many thirds do I have colored? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? I have 5 colored, and we've said that the unit fraction is thirds because this is our whole. It would be different if the whole thing was our whole, but it's not. Remember, I broke this apart. Whoops, well, with the coloring, I can't do it. But remember, this was 2 sets of thirds, and we just stuck them together. Okay? So our 2 parts of our 5/3, we have 2/3, and we have 3/3. And if I add 2/3 plus 3/3, remember looking across our numerator, we end up with 5/3, right? I have 2, that's our yellow, the 3 is our red, so we have a total of 5 portions, and our unit fraction we're talking about is thirds, okay? So I'm going to skip down a little bit. You're going to have a couple of those that you're going to do. You're going to be seeing some multicolored pieces like that. Actually, I won't skip too much here. You're going to see some multicolored pieces, and you're going to see holes labeled. So if I label this as 1 whole, look at what your unit fraction is. I have, let's just get a color on here, 1, 2, 3, 4 in my whole, right? So I know my unit fraction is going to be fourths. Now, if this was colored yellow, and then this was colored red, I'd label each portion of it, right? Here's 3 yellows, and we know it's fourths. Here's 2 reds, still fourths. So of the whole thing that's colored, it's going to be 3/4 plus 2/4. Tells me we have 5 5/4 on here, okay? Or you can also think of it as, look at this. This is kind of cool. Here's 1 whole, right? We have 1 whole shaded, and then we have 1 more fourth. So we could also say it's the same thing as 1 whole plus 1/4, or 1 and 1/4. I don't want you to worry about that part today too much, though. All right, if you got a number sentence that looked something like this, and you were asked to show this, how would you do that? Well, look at your unit fraction. We're talking about what? What's our unit fraction? We're talking about fourths, so the first thing you're going to do is set up a tape diagram or a fraction strip and make your fourths. And then you're going to highlight how many? There's a total of 3, right? And your addition sentence is going to tell you what colors to highlight or how to highlight. So it says to highlight 1 and 1 and 1, right? So you've got 1/4 plus 1/4 plus 1/4. And that equals the 3/4 that we've highlighted, right? So you can label this as your 1 whole, and then you label each portion 1/4, 1/4, and 1/4. Okay? They ask you to show something like 7/5 as 3/5 plus 3/5 plus 1/5. Okay, again, we want fifths, right? So we're going to make a rectangle, but here's the tricky part. How many parts do we have here? 7. So we're actually going to make 7 parts. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I'm going to add another one on because I didn't do it very equal. 7. But since we're talking about fifths, I'm going to show that only 5 of them makes my whole. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This is 1 whole. Do you guys see that? I'm telling everybody that this part is my whole. So now I've got 3/5, so I'm going to color in 3/5. And then I've got 3/5, so I'm going to color in 3 more fifths. And then I'm going to color in 1/5 so that I can show that 3/5 plus 3/5 plus 1/5 equals a total of 7/5. Okay, so you're going to go ahead and try that. If you are a at-home learner and this was very confusing, please feel free to come to my office hours at 10:30 after circle, and we will take a look at some of these together. Good luck.